Hello, welcome to the Purple Planet, where we help you drift into dreamland with the timeless and historical tales of queens, empresses, priestesses, and warriors from across the ages. Toypurina was a medicine woman of the Kizh people who rose to prominence during a time of profound upheaval in late 18th century Southern California. As a Spanish colonization encroached upon her ancestral lands, she became a fierce leader of indigenous resistance, embodying the spiritual and political defiance of her people. Her story stands as a testament to the resilience and enduring spirit of the Gabrielino-Tongva amid the relentless pressures of empire. Long before the first Spanish ships arrived on the sunny shores of Southern California, the land was home to a vibrant and resilient people, known to themselves as the Kizh, and to others as the Gabrielino-Tongva. Their ancestral territory stretched broadly across what is now the sprawling Los Angeles basin, encompassing the fertile valleys of the San Gabriel Mountains and the shimmering coastal estuaries along the Pacific Ocean. This landscape, varied and rich, offered the Kizh a generous bounty of natural resources: acorns from the mighty oak groves, fish from the abundant rivers and bays, game from the rolling hills that sustained their communities for countless generations. The Kizh people lived not as isolated tribes, but as an interconnected society, bound by kinship, trade networks, and shared spiritual beliefs. Their villages dotted the landscape, each strategically placed to maximize access to food, water, and shelter, while maintaining harmonious relations with the neighboring groups. Life followed the pulse of the seasons, with communal hunts, harvest festivals, and ceremonies deeply attuned to the cycles of nature. At the heart of Kizh society was a profound spirituality that infused every aspect of existence. The natural world was not merely a backdrop, but a living, breathing entity imbued with sacred power. Mountains, rivers, and animals were revered as ancestral beings and spiritual guides. Central to the spiritual framework were the shamans and medicine women, figures entrusted with the knowledge of healing, prophecy, and communication with the spirit realm. These spiritual leaders acted as custodians of tradition and peacemakers, ensuring balance between the people and the forces that governed their world. Among these sacred traditions, young women like Toypurina were often initiated into the mysteries of healing and spiritual stewardship from an early age. Raised within her community's ceremonial life, she would have learned the intricate art of using native plants for medicine, the ritual chants that summoned protective spirits, and the sacred dances that honored the cycles of life and death. This education was not merely a skill set, but a calling, one that conferred respect and authority upon those who bore it. The arrival of the Spanish in the late 18th century disrupted this centuries-old harmony. Driven by imperial ambition and religious fervor, Spanish explorers and missionaries sought to claim the land and its people for the crown and the Catholic Church. Their arrival marked the beginning of a profound and often brutal transformation of Kizh society. The establishment of missions, religious outposts, meant to convert and control the indigenous population, introduced new social structures that undermined traditional ways of life. Mission San Gabriel Arcángel, founded in 1771, stood as a stark symbol of this colonial intrusion. Its adobe walls and bell towers rose on land once held sacred by the Kizh, signaling a new order that demanded submission and relinquishment of cultural identity. The missionaries sought to replace indigenous spirituality with Christianity, often by force, while Spanish soldiers enforced compliance through intimidation and violence. This collision of worlds set the stage for conflict, resistance, and enduring legacies that resonate to this day. Yet, before the full weight of colonization pressed upon her people, Toypurina's world was one of rich cultural depth, of intimate relationships with the land, complex social ties, and a spiritual heritage that shaped every breath and step. Understanding this world is essential to grasping the magnitude of her courage and to the profound loss that followed the arrival of the Spanish Empire. The dawn of the late 18th century ushered in a period of profound upheaval for the native peoples of Alta California. Spanish colonization, driven by a fusion of imperial ambition, religious zeal, and strategic necessity, sought to extend the reach of the Spanish crown into the vast Pacific coastlands. The mission system, a cornerstone of this endeavor, was not merely a spiritual enterprise, but a comprehensive mechanism for cultural transformation and territorial domination. In 1771, Mission San Gabriel Arcángel was established in the heart of Kizh territory. Its adobe walls, rising on lands that had been home to indigenous communities for countless generations. The mission's founding friars, Franciscan missionaries, imbued with the conviction of their divine mandate, envisioned a new world order in which the native peoples would be drawn into the fold of Christianity and Spanish civilization. They sought to replace indigenous belief systems with Catholic dogma, supplant tribal governance with mission authority, and reconfigure the landscape into productive mission lands. For the Kizh people, this incursion was a cataclysmic event. The fertile valleys and abundant water sources that had long sustained their villages were seized and transformed into vast mission ranches, where cattle, sheep, and crops were cultivated under colonial direction. The communal stewardship of the land, integral to Kizh identity and spirituality, was supplanted by private ecclesiastical control. This not only disrupted traditional economic activities, such as acorn harvesting, fishing, and seasonal migrations, but also severed the spiritual connections that tied the people to their environment. The mission's influence extended beyond land appropriation. Indigenous peoples were systematically baptized and enrolled into the mission system, often under duress or coercion. The promise of salvation was intertwined with the demand for labor. Men, women, and children were compelled to work in the mission's fields, workshops, and domestic spaces. This labor, essential to the mission's self-sufficiency and economic success, was enforced through strict discipline, surveillance, and the presence of Spanish soldiers stationed at nearby presidios. Spanish soldiers, serving as both protectors of colonial order and enforcers of submission, played a crucial role in maintaining the mission's authority. Their presence underscored the coercive nature of colonization, a constant reminder to indigenous peoples that resistance could be met with violence, imprisonment, or worse. The presidios themselves were military outposts strategically placed to safeguard Spanish interests and suppress uprisings. The cultural assault was perhaps most devastating in the realm of spirituality. The missionaries condemned indigenous religious practices as heretical and sought to eradicate ceremonies, dances, and rituals that had formed the core of Kizh communal life. Medicine women and shamans, once revered as healers and spiritual guides, were marginalized or punished. The suppression of these traditions fractured social cohesion and inflicted deep psychological wounds on the community. Compounding these traumas were the ravages of European diseases, against which the Kizh had no natural immunity. Epidemics of smallpox, measles, and influenza swept through villages, decimating populations, and leaving survivors to grapple with loss and destabilization. These demographic catastrophes weakened the social fabric and further facilitated Spanish domination. Yet, despite these overwhelming pressures, the Kizh people exhibited resilience and resistance. Cultural practices were preserved covertly. Alliances between villages were maintained, and the seeds of rebellion began to take root. The mission system, while powerful, was not unchallenged. It existed in constant tension with the indigenous desire for autonomy and cultural survival. Mission San Gabriel Arcángel thus stood not only as a religious and colonial institution, but as a contested space, a symbol of Spanish imperial reach and native endurance. Its history embodies the complex interplay of conquest, survival, and the enduring spirit of the Kizh people. Amidst the gathering storm of colonial change, Toypurina was born between approximately 1760 and 1765, a time when the first Spanish expeditions were beginning to assert a presence in Southern California. She entered a world still rich with the traditions of her Kizh ancestors, a world where spiritual reverence, communal bonds, and symbiotic relationships with the land formed the foundation of daily life. From a young age, Toypurina would have been introduced to the sacred knowledge held by the medicine women and shamans of her people. These spiritual leaders occupied a vital space within Kizh society, not only as healers, but as keepers of oral history, interpreters of dreams and visions, and intermediaries between the human and spirit worlds. The path of a medicine woman demanded deep commitment, wisdom, and a connection to the unseen forces that governed health, nature, and fate. In the matrilineal currents of Kizh culture, women could wield significant spiritual and social influence, while the broader society was organized into villages led by chiefs or male leaders. Women like Toypurina occupied respected roles in ceremonial life and healing arts. Their knowledge was essential to maintaining the health of the community and the balance of spiritual forces. Toypurina's training likely involved a rigorous apprenticeship under elder medicine women, learning the properties of native plants, the rituals for healing physical and spiritual ailments, and the sacred songs and dances that invoked the protection of ancestral spirits. This education was intertwined with a profound sense of responsibility to guide her people, to protect their traditions, and to act as a voice of the ancestors. As Spanish influence intensified, Toypurina's role took on additional significance. She became a spiritual leader, not only within her own village, but also among neighboring groups, forging connections through shared ceremonies and mutual respect. Her position allowed her to bridge communities, coordinate gatherings, and foster a collective identity rooted in indigenous heritage. Her rise as a medicine woman coincided with increasing threats from the colonial forces. The spiritual resilience she embodied became inseparable from the political realities facing her people. In an era when Indigenous voices were often silenced by the missionaries and soldiers, Toypurina's authority as a medicine woman positioned her uniquely to inspire resistance and to mobilize those who sought to reclaim their land and culture. Her life during these formative years was marked by the juxtaposition of ancient traditions and the encroaching pressures of colonization, a tension that would ultimately propel her into the historical spotlight as a leader of rebellion and a symbol of Indigenous defiance. By the mid-1780s, the simmering tensions between the Kizh people and the Spanish colonial authorities had reached a critical boiling point. The mission system, which had steadily eroded Indigenous autonomy and imposed grueling physical and spiritual demands, became a site of profound contestation. Forced conversions to Christianity were accompanied by relentless labor in mission fields and workshops, often under threat of punishment or violence. Traditional spiritual practices were outlawed, and the social fabric of Kizh society was fraying under the weight of colonial oppression. Within this crucible of suffering and resistance, Toypurina emerged as a central figure in organizing a bold and coordinated rebellion, drawing upon her spiritual authority and respected status as a medicine woman. She forged alliances across multiple villages, uniting disparate groups with a shared desire to reclaim freedom and dignity. Alongside other Indigenous leaders, including Nicolas José, she helped plan an uprising aimed at expelling the Spanish from Mission San Gabriel. The rebellion was meticulously orchestrated to coincide with a mission celebration, a time when Spanish soldiers and missionaries would be gathered and potentially vulnerable. Toypurina's role was both symbolic and strategic. Her spiritual standing lent weight to the cause, inspiring warriors and common folk alike to rise against the colonizers. However, the uprising of October 1785 was ultimately thwarted by the better armed and organized Spanish forces. The colonial authorities, forewarned or swift in their response, suppressed the revolt with force. Toypurina and her co-conspirators were captured, their plans dismantled before they could fully unfold. Her capture marked a poignant moment in the history of Indigenous resistance. During her trial, Toypurina's defiance was unyielding. She spoke candidly of her hatred for the Spanish padres and soldiers, condemning their presence on her ancestral lands. Her declaration, "I hate the padres and all of you for living here on my native soil, for trespassing upon the land of my forefathers," resonated as a powerful indictment of colonial injustice and cultural dispossession. The trial records, though filtered through colonial perspectives, reveal a woman of fierce conviction who refused to capitulate quietly. Her words and actions embodied the collective anguish and determination of her people, crystallizing her role as a symbol of resistance against the forces that sought to extinguish Indigenous identity. Aftermath of the revolt and Toypurina's later life. Following the failed rebellion, Toypurina's fate was shaped by the harsh realities of colonial justice and assimilationist policies. Imprisoned for her role in the uprising, she was subjected to the mechanisms of control that sought not only to punish, but to transform Indigenous subjects into compliant colonial citizens. In 1787, under likely duress, Toypurina was baptized into the Catholic Church, receiving the Christian name Regina Jose. This act represented a profound rupture from her previous life and beliefs, emblematic of the broader efforts to erase Native spiritual identities. The baptism was not merely a religious rite, but a tool of colonial power, signaling submission and the imposition of a new social order. Her subsequent arranged marriage to Manuel Montero, a Spanish soldier, further entrenched her within the colonial system. Marriages such as these were often employed by colonial authorities as means of controlling indigenous women, integrating them into settler society, and diluting indigenous lineage. Whether she acquiesced willingly or resisted privately remains a matter of historical speculation, but the union underscored the complexities faced by Native women navigating survival under colonial rule. Despite her incorporation into colonial society, Toypurina's story did not vanish. Though the details of her later years remained scarce, her legacy persisted, sometimes obscured, sometimes celebrated, as a symbol of indigenous endurance and resistance. Her life journey reflected the broader narrative of Native American peoples caught in the tumult of empire, the loss of autonomy, the struggle to preserve identity, and the indomitable spirit that refused to be extinguished. Toypurina's later existence, shaped by the contradictions of survival and subjugation, invites reflection on the human dimensions of colonial history, on the resilience of those who lived through it, and the enduring impact of their struggles on the cultural landscape of California. In the centuries following the colonial upheavals that shaped her life, Toypurina's story endured as both a historical record and a potent symbol. For the descendants of the Kizh, now more commonly known as the Tongva, and for Native American historians and cultural activists, she came to embody the courage and resilience of a people who faced near erasure under colonial rule. The legacy of Toypurina is multifaceted. On one hand, she is remembered as a woman who dared to challenge the Spanish mission system's imposition, leading a revolt at a time when indigenous voices were systematically silenced and indigenous agency severely constrained. Her role as a medicine woman who mobilized spiritual and political resistance highlights the critical leadership roles women held within Kizh society and the broader indigenous world. In the modern era, Toypurina's image has been revived and honored through murals, public art, scholarship, and cultural events that seek to reclaim and celebrate Tongva heritage. Artists have portrayed her not simply as a rebel, but as a guardian of ancestral knowledge and a symbol of cultural endurance. These memorials serve as reminders of the injustices faced by indigenous peoples and as affirmations of their ongoing presence and vitality. Her story also invites reflection on the complexity of indigenous survival strategies in the face of colonial violence. Toypurina's later baptism and marriage into colonial society underline the difficult choices indigenous individuals confronted, choices often framed by coercion, pragmatism, and the imperative to protect family and community within an oppressive system. Moreover, Toypurina represents more than historical fact. She inhabits the realm of mythology and identity for the Tongva people. As a figure of resistance, she inspires pride and a renewed commitment to cultural preservation among Native communities. Her narrative challenges simplistic portrayals of indigenous peoples as passive victims, instead illuminating their agency, resilience, and enduring connection to their homelands. In contemplating Toypurina's life, one is drawn to a quiet meditation on survival, not only of an individual woman, but of a culture striving to persist amid the forces of displacement and assimilation. She stands as a testament to the unyielding spirit of the Kizh Gabrielino-Tongva, a beacon of defiance and hope that continues to illuminate the history of California's first peoples. Her story, woven from fragments of historical record and enriched by community memory, remains a vital thread in the tapestry of Indigenous history, one that urges us to remember, honor, and learn from the complex legacies of colonization and resistance.